Welcome to this episode of Out of the Best Books, the podcast where we deep dive into classic literature and have conversations about what we've learned and discovered along the way. We love all things books and reading, and we want to share our love of the classics with you. We hope to inspire you to read along with us and join in the conversation. I'm Amity.
And I'm Laura. Now let's get talking about the classics. So today we are going to do kind of a bonus episode where we're going to each give you our top 10 list of the classics that we've read so far in life. So we thought this would be kind of a good thing to do at the beginning of our podcast overall, and maybe revisit it down the road a little ways and see if it's changed after we've read some more. So we're really excited to share some of these with you. Let's see. So we're going to alternate back and forth, and
good deal. Okay. So the first one that I want to talk about is Uncle Tom's Cabin, written by Harriet Beecher Stowe. Her father was a very intense abolitionist, and she was too. And this was kind of her way of contributing to the abolition movement. And it was a huge bestseller at the time because it really, I think that there's some people nowadays that may look at it and knock it a bit, but she really tried to get into the nitty gritty so that people could really see how awful and how unfair and unjust the life was for a slave. And so it follows several people. It follows this little family, this young woman who marries a man who's doesn't live on the same plantation as her, but they have a child, and they're trying to escape and get to a better life. It follows the story of course, Uncle Tom, who's taken away from his family, and it shows just how severe and thoughtless and egotistical and just awful a lot of these Southern plantation owners were. And it was like, not only did they not care about these humans that they had turned into chattel, they also didn't really care about each other. And so it really showed you how like their humanity was gone. Anyway, that's probably a much longer explanation than you want, but it's a really fantastic story. And it's one that I read to my kids, and it's a cry book. Like I ugly cried at the end. So
that I remember my younger sister majored in English at the University of Oregon, and I remember her reading that. And at the time thinking, that looks hard. Okay, my number 10 is Great Expectations by this is funny. I typed Charles Dickens because my son's name is Charlie.
Charles Dickens.
Yeah, I don't normally type Charles, so that must be how that came in. That's funny. So some of these, well, I should preface this with, when we talked about doing this, I was like, I'm probably just going to tell you the 10 classics that I have read instead of my top 10, because I haven't read that many. So, and that's why I'm doing this podcast, because I'm interested in reading more. But anyway, so some of these are ones I haven't read for several years, maybe a couple of decades. This one I read in high school and haven't read it since. So, to be honest, the only thing I remembered about the story was the guy that sat against the wall and left his grease print on the wall from his head. So
that literally leaves an impression both on that wall and on your mind.
Yeah,
like
that so stood out to me. And we had this high school teacher that he read it to us. So we would just go to class and he would read. That's
interesting.
Yeah.
How was it? Like, okay, he wasn't very good.
It was okay. I don't remember, but I would rather have read it myself.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'd love to read this again someday for the podcast, just so I can remember it. But according to the blurb on Amazon or wherever I looked up, this is a story of aspirations and moral redemption. It's about an orphan named Pip who is living with his not very nice older sister. And it's a tale about crime and guilt, redemption and reward, love and loss. And it also said that this is one of I think it was the last of his great novels. So I thought that was kind of good. But yeah. Have you read that one?
Yeah, it totally made my list.
Uh-oh. So
I've
you're
read that. So that's okay. I think that's okay. I'll just say that's my next one because
no, but the funny thing is I was thinking we should have prefaced this with we didn't tell each other what was on
yeah,
the list. And I thought
yeah,
maybe that would happen. So
yeah, there
why
may
don't
be some crossovers.
why don't you make that in your next one and tell us better what it's about?
No, I think that there's some really interesting characters in it. Our main character is Pip, who he goes through kind of a full circle metamorphosis, I want to say, because he goes from this young boy who is um like you say, he lives with his very harsh older sister. He has some pretty interesting experiences as a young boy, but he gains this benefactor somehow who sends him to school, and all this time he has this idea that it's this really wealthy person who has put him through school and is expecting him to make something of himself. And then he finds out that it's not. It's this extremely poor former convict who paid for his schooling. And when he finds that out, he treats this guy so horribly. And anyway, but he he evolves, he changes, he learns, and yeah, just lots of really interesting characters, lots of things to think about and learn from the whole story. So yeah, I really enjoy it. It's one that moves along really well. Like I said, has just some very eccentric and strange, bizarre, and very interesting people. So
We'll have to put
I
that
like
on
it.
our list
Yeah.
of books to cover. So my number 9 was Mansfield Park by Jane Austen.
Mm.
I've always struggled with Jane Austen. This is probably the only one I ever finished. So that's gonna have to change because we're gonna have to do some Jane Austen. I read it as a part of a book club with my sisters and a couple of friends so many years ago. And so Mansfield Park is the story of Fanny Price, who, because of her parents' financial state, was sent to live with her aunt and uncle at their country estate, Mansfield Park. When she gets there, she's uncomfortable because of her lack of manners and then not being
Mm.
used to the luxury that they live in.
Mm.
And so at first, they don't treat her very well and she's homesick, but eventually she forms a bond with her cousin, Edmund, who she then falls in love with. And she has to watch him fall in love with somebody else.
Mm.
So, have you read that one? What do you
So that's one that I have not read. It's definitely on my to be read. Awesome.
Okay, so if you were to pick which Jane Austen you would want to be our first one that we cover, which one would it be?
Okay. That's so hard because I had like the hardest time putting one of her books on my top 10 because I was like, I'm just going
Couldn't
to
pick
keep
one.
it to one. Yeah. That's really hard. So well, maybe we could do Mansfield Park. That might be fun
Since you haven't read it.
because I
That's the
haven't
only
read
one
it.
I've read.
Yeah. Why not?
No, we'll do this for 30 years and get through all of them.
Yeah.
Just kidding. If there's still podcasts in 30 years.
I know. Seriously. What will be next?
Okay, what was your number 8?
Okay. Well, so since you brought up Jane Austen, I had such a hard time. So I went with Persuasion. Okay, so we've got this, it's the story of Anne, and she and Captain Wentworth were like, they were like engaged and then it broke off and he thought that she didn't want to marry him. And so he's all bitter at her and because her family had persuaded her not to, whatever, and not to marry him. And anyway, and then he like comes back into her life and she's there and he's there and there's just all this drama and they just like, as in all Jane Austen, so this isn't really a spoiler, they come together at the end and fall in love again and realize they've like always loved each other. And it's just, oh my gosh, I don't know. It's just very romantic and I really love it.
Well, I believe that is also how Mansfield Park ends.
Guarantee it is. And that's fine.
At
It's
the
still,
end, they find out they loved each other.
Yeah.
So my next one is Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy.
Awesome.
Did that one make you? I hope it did make it.
So that's one that I haven't read. Because I was making up my to be read, like my top 10 to be read, and that's on my top 10 to be read.
Ah. So in real time, we're actually reading Far From the Madding Crowd for the podcast. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I also
Yeah.
read this years ago for book club. And I remember a couple of things about it, but I remember a car crash or something, which that might not even be right. But um, anyways, I don't exactly remember. But Tess is a novel about a poor young woman named Tess Durbeyfield, whose father sends her to work for the rich Stoke Duberville. How would you say that? Stoke Duberville family. And he thinks they're related, but they're not. And then I believe this may be where the car comes in, but Tess falls asleep and one of the family, Alec, rapes her. And then she goes home and gives birth to a son, and then the son dies. So, anyways, that's just kind of the setup of it. But I remember it being interesting. And like I said, I have struggled with classics in the past. So like for one to have been interesting to me, it was stands out.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So one thing that I was reading was about how that was one of Thomas Hardy's later novels, and he kind of got a lot of grief for it. Because it was very sort of edgy for the time. And he, like, after that, he was like, okay, I'm not going to write anymore. I just want to do poetry. I'm not going to write stories anymore. But it's an enduring classic. So,
When I read that, I was like, I don't remember there being a rape in the book. And that did seem a little odd for a book
yeah,
written back then. So yeah,
yeah,
I would 100% believe that.
yeah. Interesting. My next one I'm going to talk about is The Art of War by Sun Tzu. So it's not really a story, but it's a whole bunch of like how to beat your enemy. I loved it. I I read it just like the book, and then I listened to it with commentary. That was super fascinating. I learned so much that way. But the thing about it is you learn that the art of war, if you learn all these principles, it's going to help you in life, business, relationship, like just anytime you have to talk to people or have any sort of confrontation or whatever. So here's one of my favorite quotes from it, because it really is sort of like just this list of how to be successful. But in the commentary, here's the thing that I was interesting about the commentary is that it told stories about different generals and like from a long time ago, and ways that they would like implement these things. And there was, I'm not going to share it. It was kind of horrifying, but okay. So here's one of my favorite quotes. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. Know the enemy and know yourself, and you're always going to be successful, right? If you know yourself, but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer defeat. Okay. So like you'll have victories, but you're also going to have defeats because you only know half. But you do know yourself, so there's going to be some victory. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. You're going to always lose. So know your enemy, know yourself. And, and then the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. So there you go.
That's so
It's,
interesting.
yeah, it's really good. I really like it a lot.
That kind of made me think of like brain, like, okay, so there's this idea that your brain is separate from you. So like your brain's job is to keep you alive,
Mm,
save energy, you know, um, conserve energy, keep you alive. I don't know, protect you, right? And so like, especially when I think about like eating food. So I like that. Know yourself, like what
Mm.
you actually want, but then your enemy is kind of your brain. And if
Yeah.
you know what your brain wants, then you can like, yeah, you can win. But then like, oh, what was I thinking? Something about that. Like if you don't understand, oh, and then what was the last quote? Something about, read me the last one again.
So the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting.
Okay, so when your brain is telling you that it wants something that you don't want, you're supposed to say to it, like, I hear you, because it wants to be heard.
Mm.
So you're kind of like, I don't know, like
Yeah.
pushing it away doesn't really subdue that enemy. It just kind of
True.
like, anyways, I just thought that was interesting.
It's sort of procrastinating the inevitable.
Yeah,
So
because your brain just, and so like if you don't tell your brain, yeah, I hear you. I know you want to say, I'm just using food as an example. I know you want to eat that, but you know,
yeah.
we're choosing something different right now. It'll keep trying.
Hmm.
But once you tell it to calm down, I hear you, then it can like stop.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
if that makes any sense.
No, that's an amazing application for
Yeah,
sure.
maybe I should read that.
Cool.
Okay, my next one is The Wizard of Oz by L. Frank
Ooh,
Baum.
awesome.
So I read this like probably 2 years ago after I'd read Finding Dorothy by Elizabeth Letts, which I think you've read, but it's a book
Yes.
mostly about Frank Baum's wife. And I just thought he was such an interesting man. And like as I was reading the book and listening to how he was as a storyteller and like how he struggled and just everything about him was interesting to me. And I just got more and more and more interested in reading his books. And I thought, oh, I'm just going to read straight through them. So I didn't. I just read the first one, but maybe someday I'll pick up the rest. But it was just interesting to hear the kind of fictionalized, what historical fiction about
Yeah.
his wife, how the kids just loved his stories that he would tell. And so it just made me interested. But and it's a little different than the movie we all know, but it was interesting. So I have like a beautiful version of it that I picked up at a secondhand store. So I just read.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Um, I remember reading it as a kid and I really liked it. There's some parts that are a little like strange, but whatever. But for that's when I did not read to my kids. Instead, we listened to it and it was narrated by Anne Hathaway. And it was kind of fantastic. I thought she did a great job. So I'd
That's good.
recommend.
I don't know. We used to also watch that movie every year. It was
Mm.
it was on television every year, like the day after Thanksgiving, and so we always watched it.
Oh. I was gonna ask like what time of year was that? The day after Thanksgiving, huh?
Yeah,
Interesting.
when I was a child. And my mom, I mean, it was the thing. We knew it was going to be on. They don't
Yeah.
do that kind of stuff anymore, I don't think. But I was thinking too, like, we love the musical Hamilton. And I was kind of thinking we should, as a family, just pick a day every year that we're going to watch it,
Oh, that's a fun idea.
just because
Yeah.
kind of forget about stuff. And
Yeah. So the next one I'm going to talk about is I had to include Shakespeare and he's like Jane Austen. I was like, how do I choose? So I went with Much Ado About Nothing because it's so funny and it's just so great. So it's the story of Beatrice and Benedict, and she's just determined that they're not going to be a thing. And I don't know. It's just like this back and forth, back and forth. And then there's all this drama. Beatrice's little sister pretending that she's dead so that she can bring back her fiance, who everybody told him that she had been unfaithful and whatever. There's just like all this drama and it's really funny. And Benedict and Beatrice, of course, again. And it's all of Shakespeare's comedies. In the end, everybody gets married. And that's exactly how this one ends. But it really is much ado about who knows what, like nothing. But it's really funny and really clever. And
much ado about absolutely nothing.
yeah, yeah,
My next one is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte.
awesome.
So another one I read in high school. Apparently, we read classics in high
You
school.
did.
I really don't think they do nowadays. or at least their
which
classics
is,
are different.
yeah. Well, and that's when we were talking about doing this podcast, that's one of the things that came to mind. It was like, they're not teaching the classics
Mm-mm.
in high school. And that's so tragic to me. And I've literally heard teachers say things like, well, the kids just won't like them. They're going to be too boring for them. And I'm like, what? This is like these are the most amazing stories, the most incredible characters. So much discussion can happen with this, so much learning. I think it's exactly what kids need. And you know what? If they're bored for a minute, oh well, they can still learn that there's stuff to learn in things that maybe initially they think are boring.
Or make it exciting.
Yeah, make it exciting because it is. They're really exciting. They're amazing. So, yeah.
Yes. So this one is one I read in high school, and then I've read it again as an adult, but and I'm sure everybody knows the plot, right? So here goes. There's two families, the Earnshaws and the Lintons, and Heathcliff, who is bitter because of abuse and because the love of his life, Kathy, marries Edgar Linton. And so he plans revenge on both families, and this goes on for more than their generation. Um, but even Kathy's death in childbirth doesn't set him free from this revenge that he needs to get between on the family. So the question is, will the marriage between the surviving heirs restore peace to the family? And from high school, like I said, with Great Expectations, I remember the grease spot on the wall. Well, with this one, I remember our teacher drawing us a diagram of how Heathcliff planned to be buried next to Kathy. Because
Interesting.
even in death, he wanted to be right next to her.
Yeah,
I can picture the drawing in my head of
that's cool.
the graves and like the how he was gonna roll on over into her side. It's very funny.
Yeah. I always loved that book and it almost made my list, but yeah, such great characters. And he is such a tragic and sad character.
Yes.
Um, but he almost gets to the point where you don't have much compassion for him anymore because he makes everybody around him so miserable and he's just mean. I will say that there is an incredible movie rendition of it. I think it's amazing with Tom Hardy as Heathcliff.
Oh,
Oh, I love it. And Kathy is played by Tom Hardy's wife. At least they were married at the time. Who knows?
I'll
They
have to go
still
look it
are,
up.
but she's gorgeous. Her name is not coming to my head, but anyway, I thought
The
it
other
was
the
very
other
well
thing I
done.
remembered about that was I think we don't talk about ourselves much, like in the
Mm-mm.
beginning. A lot of podcasts they'll like kind of chit chat or whatever, so you don't really know much about us, but you'll learn as we go, the little bits and pieces. So I was a pianist, and it was something I did pretty seriously as a child and high schooler, and I actually went to college for it. But um, when I was reading this in high school, I went and rented the video tape, right? Because that's how old I am. And there was this special video store downtown that rented out old classics. So I went down there and rented it, and there was a Chopin piece playing, like in one of the scenes where she goes to a party.
Mm.
And I just remember it. I remember loving that Chopin piece. And then when I went to college, I got to play it, like learn it
Oh,
and play
that's
it.
cool.
I know it was really cool. So I
That
could
is
just
really
like,
cool.
that was my connection with the
That's
movie.
awesome. And I love that you were able to pull that out of the movie. You're like, oh, that's Chopin.
I love that. Oh,
And I want to play it.
it was
That's
like
incredible.
it was probably the one piece of music that I just was like, someday I'm going to play that. And I could still play like the first 5 or 6 measures of it.
That's awesome.
Okay. So you're on number 5, or well, you're fifth, right?
Yeah. Okay. My next one is Up from Slavery by Booker T. Washington. So it's autobiographical. It tells the story of his life. And he did start out as a slave, just as a very young child. But then he chronicles just like the struggles he went through and making something of himself. And it was really amazing. Now, because he believed that he lived through the Emancipation Proclamation and everything. And he believed that Black people absolutely should be educated and self-sufficient and really make something of themselves. Now, this was before Jim Crow laws, which were just like horrible, horrible. He was an amazing man. He started a college, and um, he he had all of these people who had formerly been slaves, or maybe their parents had been, and they came to this college, and he made sure that they were very well educated, but he also taught them practical skills. He taught them how to farm really effectively, and it was important that they learned how to clean and keep themselves clean. Like, it was like an all-encompassing school. And it was really fantastic. And he was somebody who he was invited to speak all over the country and was very well respected. And he has a quote that I just really love, and I feel like it applies all the time. And well, there's a couple of quotes I'm going to share. So the first one is, he said, "A lie doesn't become truth, wrong doesn't become right, and evil doesn't become good just because it's accepted by the majority." And like, we hear all the time, speak your truth. Truth is subjective, which it's not. And so just because something is accepted by the majority doesn't make it real or true. He also said, success is not measured by where you are in life, but the obstacles you've overcome. Anyway, just an
Like
incredible
that.
man. It's, yeah, so wonderful. And as time went on, like, I think that there were people in his community that felt like he was betraying them or whatever. And he was like, "I don't feel like I am. Um, I feel like I'm doing the best that I can, and trying to uplift everybody around me." And anyway, it's actually a pretty small book, but I love it. I think it's incredible. So,
I love you're bringing books I've never heard of.
oh, good.
See, we're all gonna learn so much from this. I mean, me, I'm gonna learn so much from this. Okay, so we didn't tell each other, but what books were on our list, but I know you have this one on your list. So I'm gonna just say what it is, and then you're gonna kind of tell about it because you're better at this. So my next one is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott.
Oh, I didn't end up putting that one on my
Oh,
list
well then
because
I'll
I was
tell
like,
about it.
yeah, yeah, go ahead. And I
'Cause-
can jump in if you want, but I was like, I think I'll classify that as a kid's book, but
Okay.
it's
Okay.
it's not really. Okay.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
the story follows four sisters, Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy. And again, everybody knows the plot, right? So, as they grow from childhood to adulthood, and their father is at war, they deal with friendship, love, sickness, and then their relationships with each other. This book could be considered like a Christmas time sometimes. It's considered that, right? And then the new movie was fantastic, like a couple of years ago, I think. And eventually, there's a couple of books by Virginia Contra, I think, that I'd like to pick up. One is called Meg and Jo, and then the second one is called Beth and Amy. And I've
Mm.
heard really good things about them. So,
Oh, cool.
yeah, there's so many, adaptations of Little Women. Here's my question. Have you ever read Little Men?
Yes.
How's that one?
It's been quite a while, but yeah, it was really good. I enjoyed Little Women a lot better. And in fact, I enjoyed um some of her other books a bit better than Little Men as well.
Okay.
That doesn't mean it was bad. Just I enjoyed some of the others better.
Yeah, she would be a fun one to read, something a little less known, but, you know,
Hmm.
from her. So,
Yeah.
all right, your turn.
Okay. I'm gonna go with, for my next one, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. And that's another one that's probably on a lot of people's top 10, and everybody kind of knows the plot, but um it's again one of those just kind of awesome love stories. It's just kind of what I love. And she starts out as this very neglected and sort of unloved orphan and sort of reminiscent of Harry Potter a little bit, just everybody being so mean to her. Well, or Harry Potter is reminiscent of Jane Eyre. I guess we should say that. But and then she goes to this school. It's a horrible school, but she survives and she thrives, and then she becomes the governess for, oh my gosh. I
Mr.
just
Rochester.
Mr. Rochester. I'm like, Rockefeller? Nope. Rochester. Mr. Rochester. For Mr. Rochester's daughter. And there's a big mystery in his house. He's mysterious. But she falls in love with him and he falls in love with her. And there's still lots of obstacles in the way, but they overcome them. And it's just a fantastic story. So
Yes,
love it.
that was on my list as number 2.
Oh, awesome.
Just great because you did a much better job than I would have. Um, all right. Yeah, I didn't even think I put anything extra about that, but I love that book. Okay, my next one is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. So this is perfect for October, which we are in right now. I don't know if
Yeah.
you'll be listening to this in October, but we might be at the end. So there's also a new-ish Netflix adaptation, which a lot of people didn't really like, but I thought it was entertaining, and I even got my husband to watch it with me. So, and he was
I
interested.
actually really liked it too. And the thing is, I can be kind of harsh on movie adaptations of books, but I actually really liked it. And I love the book Rebecca. It's one of those just like
Yeah.
so suspenseful and just kind of creepy. But yeah, I actually really like the
Yeah.
movie.
And my husband watched it and was interested, so that was good enough to keep
Yeah.
me there. That was good. So I loved this description that I found. Rebecca is a twisting tale full of morally gray characters and deceit. And then it's kind of a dark and atmospheric setting, which is why it's perfect for October, where Maxim de Winter brings in a shy new bride into his Manderley state. And his first wife, her influence is very much in the house. And this lady feels like an outsider and like she doesn't fit in. And, like all the staff is mad that she's there. And anyways, so it's just her feeling like an outsider while she tries to unravel this mystery of what happened to Rebecca. So yeah, perfect winter book.
Yeah, it
Or
is.
fall,
Halloween,
perfect fall.
fall. Yeah. Yeah.
I loved it.
Totally. Such a good one. My next one I'm going to talk about is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas.
We're gonna do that because I want to read that book.
It's so good. I will say the only reason it's not like my top favorite is because there are several chapters in there that, first of all, if you've seen the book, like it's massive. It's so big. Um, but there are several chapters that I was like, okay, I kind of feel like Dumas was writing this just because, like, as a filler to sort of stretch out the publications in the weekly or monthly magazine or whatever it is, because they get money like per publication, right? And so I was like, okay, I feel like this is just a filler. But nevertheless, the story, I just love the story. So it's the story of Edmond Dantes, who's a very poor, illiterate French sailor. And he has a good friend who he thought was a good friend. Edmond, he has this gorgeous girlfriend, Mercedes, and he has sort of this string of good luck. And his friend, who's actually a very wealthy guy, like he kind of has everything already, but he's jealous of Edmond and he betrays him. And there's this whole web of lies that ends up getting Edmund, who's just this completely innocent, he's never done anything wrong in his life, probably completely innocent guy, sent to the Chateau d'If, which is this prison on an island. And he's there for, I think, 13 years. He meets this old man who he calls priest, who has also been there on completely just stupid charges. And this man teaches him to read. He teaches him fencing and fighting. He teaches him social graces. And they are digging their way out of the prison. And it takes many years. He gets out. Uh, he he joins up with this pirate crew for a little while. He finds this amazing treasure that the priest had this treasure map for him. He finds this treasure, and he uses the treasure to exact his revenge on all the people who had done him wrong. And that part is kind of sad, but he makes good friends along the way. He develops a relationship with this young woman named Ade. And in the end, I remember like the very last lines of the book. I love him. It's like basically like when things are going horribly wrong, like just remember these two words: wait and hope. Like, things are going to turn out. Wait and hope. So, yeah, I love it. It's a great book. And there's an amazing movie rendition that does not follow the book really very well at all, but I love it. And I actually kind of love how they changed the ending. The one with Jim Caviezel. I really love it. I've seen some older renditions that follow the book more closely, but like I actually really love that one. So
We'll have to read that one, and it just will take us like a year, or me, like a year to get through it.
maybe we should just start rating it now and we'll plan to talk about it like next year sometime.
Yes. Dude, like, have you seen the app Serial Reader where it sends you
Huh.
like I think it's like a 10-minute segment of it every day. So
Oh,
you
that's
can
cool.
you pick a
Oh.
book and it tells you how many days it'll take you to read it. And that one's a lot of days, but a lot. I think I read Jane Eyre once that way. But they
Mm,
send it to you on your phone and then you
cool.
can just read it. Like I was just at lunch, I would read for 10 minutes, but
That's a really cool
okay.
idea.
My next one is The Blue Castle by Lucy Montgomery. So this is a lesser known novel by the same author as Anne of Green Gables. And I had heard about this, and so that a lot of people like it even more than Anne of Green Gables, which I didn't as much. But I mean, I loved it, but not it. You'll find out that that's my number one. So you couldn't top it. But so this is a story. Have you read this one? I think.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we read it for book club
Hmm.
when we were living in the same town. The story is set in the 20s in a fictional town in Canada. And Valency is a 29-year-old old maid who lives with a family that treats her like a child. And she decides to move out of her mother's house and she takes a position as a housekeeper for a friend of hers who's dying. Her friend's name is Sissy. And along the way, she gets some news that she only has a year to live. And so she says, I'm not going to move back in with my mother. And she proposes to a man named Barney. And I think she even tells him, look, I only have a year to live, so you won't be stuck with me forever. Like, can we just get married and I'm gonna be gone? Um, and so he agrees to marry her, but her family is not happy because he's a disreputable man. And there's a lot more mystery to him and stuff that happens to her. I really liked it. I thought it was
I remember loving it so much. And it raises the question, like, what would you dare to do if you knew your life's endpoint? Like, because that's the whole reason that she dared to ask him to marry her. Like, she was a very shy and reserved person. And then she was like, you know what?
I have nothing to
The
lose.
heck with it. I have nothing to lose. I'm going to die. So, dude, will you marry me? And yeah, like, I really loved it.
And they like move out into his little cottage that's like,
It's like on an island.
yes,
Yeah.
I loved it.
All right. My next one I'm going to say is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Have you heard of this one?
I've heard of it.
Okay. So, Viktor Frankl was a survivor of the Holocaust. He was obviously Jewish, and he just wrote about all of his observations from a psychological perspective. I mean, like you get his story and you get the idea of the horrifying nature of the death camps and how awful the Nazis were and just their horrible situation. But he's, again, like I said, he's looking at it from a psychological perspective and trying to figure out how that can apply to every person, because we're not in concentration camps, far from it, but in life there is suffering. So he took that extreme condition and was like, well, how are these people dealing with it? And then how can, in our very comfy lives that still have suffering, how can we deal with suffering? And I hope that made some kind of sense.
Yes.
I wanted to share just a couple of quotes from him. So he said, he who has a why to live can bear with almost any how. And so that really comes back to the meaning. Like, we need to have some sort of meaning in our life.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that we're living for? You know? And he said, in some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning, such as the meaning of a sacrifice. It's like, it makes me think of like when you have a baby. I've had 6 babies and I happen to have all of them without painkiller or drugs of any kind. And that is like extreme pain. Like, and they say that's like literally women are flirting with death every time they have a baby. And it does, it takes you like to the edge. And you can't endure much more than that. But you do it and you keep doing it. In your case, you did it 5 times. In my case, I did it 5 times or 6 times. Some people have done it 12 times, whatever, because there's meaning there, because you're bringing life into the world. And so suffering ceases. You don't necessarily think of it as suffering, like a horrific pain, but like it ceases to be suffering as soon as there's meaning there. And then
Yeah.
it just becomes a sacrifice. It's like, hey, I'm willing to go through this pain because I'm bringing this beautiful miracle into the world.
Yeah.
So
Well,
anyway,
I didn't do it drug free, but I used to tell people giving birth is fun. Mostly because they then put this perfect, amazing package in your arms, and
yes.
then you forget about everything that just happened.
Exactly.
Something, then you want to do it
Exactly.
again. I'm not really sure why.
Yeah. And the truth is that even if you do it with painkiller, like that doesn't lessen the toll that it takes on your body. So,
Okay, I only have one more. Do you have 2 more or
no,
one?
I have one more.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So I thought we got off for some reason. My favorite is Anne of Green Gables by Lucy Maud Montgomery. Oh, that book.
So good.
I know. I love it. I love it. I love it. Love it. Love it. I mean, I read that as a child. My mom bought me like the box set or whatever. And then my husband, I don't know which time, he's in the hospital. I think it was right after I had our first child, our son, our only son. My husband was in the hospital about a month before, like a month before I had him, and then in and out of the hospital after I had him. And I remember reading that in ICU. And I just, anyways, it was like my bright spot
It would
amongst
be.
like
Yeah,
just
that's
awful,
cool.
an awful situation. He turned out okay. He's still here with us, so everything's fine. But
But in the moment,
yeah, and I can just picture how when you're reading a certain book and you see yourself, like I was behind his bed in the ICU just reading, and I was thinking, well, at least I'm reading. Like I could say I read. I can't remember if Charlie, I don't think I think it was the end of my pregnancy. I don't think he had been born yet, because once he was born, there was no reading.
well, yeah. Yeah,
There was walking
seriously.
the hospital halls while he screamed is what was
Mm,
going on.
but you
Anyway,
got in a good book
yeah,
before
and I'm not even
that.
going to tell you what it's about because everybody knows, but I must love books about orphans, and we also watched the movies. The mini is must have been like a mini series over and over and over as children. So
They're so good. Like at this point, I remember learning the theme song on the piano. I love the theme song. But at this point, I just hear the theme song and I just like burst into tears because it's
Gilbert.
so but like all of it, it's just like so nostalgic and just so beautiful and all the scenery, the oh my gosh, the movie is the from the 80s.
Yes,
So good. So
yes,
good. Love
I loved it.
it. Okay, so then my number one is actually Far from the Madding Crowd, at least
Oh.
as of right now. I just by Thomas Hardy. I love it so much. So much.
And we're both enjoying it a lot right now
Yeah, it's
as we're
so
reading.
funny. It has so many wonderful insights into people and their thought processes, and it's just a wonderful story. So just super brief overview. It's the story of Gabriel Oak and Bathsheba Everdeen, and just the way that their lives entwine in unlikely ways. And she unexpectedly comes to wealth where she had been poor. He unexpectedly goes to extreme poverty where he'd been like looking at, a promising future. And because of that, he has to go to work for her. And he likes her, but she doesn't like him. But she has a lot of growing to do and a lot of trials to go through and a lot of suitors apparently to go through before she realizes that, as the song says, it is you I have loved all along. So
I see a theme in these classics.
I know all the ones I love. Good grief. I'm not like this weird romance. Not all of them are that way.
No, it's just funny, like, oh, well, we loved you. And maybe that's like a big theme though, like in classics. It's like,
That's
well,
true.
I loved you all along, so now we're
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. That's true.
Very funny.
Uh,
So yeah, that's 10 classics. So eventually we'll do a top 10 or a list of 10 that we want to read that we haven't read, possibly.
yeah. Yeah.
I thought
I'm
we would
excited
have
for that.
to. Although I have a lot to choose from. You've read everything.
No, I haven't. And it, like, I, yeah, I realize that there's like so many. And there's a lot that I'm like, why haven't I read that? That's dumb. But so
That would be me with all the Jane Austen books. Like, I mean, I think like when for book club, we would always, at once a year, we'd all present 3 or 4 books and somebody would bring up a Jane Austen and I'd be like, no, please, I can't do it. But I have a much better attitude about it now. So we're going to love them. And I can see as we're studying and reading that it's getting easier and
awesome.
easier.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast was so that people that wanted to read the classics wouldn't feel um, overwhelmed or intimidated by them and realize that try it.
Yeah. Or feel like it's something that's just not for them or something they can't do, because if you can read the classics. And if you can read, you can enjoy the classics.
Yeah. And if you need proof, I'm it. That's the goal here. And I'm excited because I think like maybe we'll do a few and then we'll try a Jane Austen and I'll be like,
Yeah.
oh, I totally am like have been immersed more in this language.
Mhm.
I understand what's going on more. So I
Yeah.
mean it's funny
So
because
cool.
not that I usually have comprehension problems, but with the older classics I have. So anyways,
Yeah. Well, I think it's just a matter of like sort of getting tied up in the language and
yeah.
figuring out like what are they alluding to? Because a lot of times, you talked about in Tess of the D'Urbervilles not remembering that there was a rape. And probably it was like the way that he said it, it was like not obvious. He
I
probably didn't
probably didn't
say,
know there was one.
yeah. It was like sort of like a very roundabout way of inferring that that's what happened, but with all this very flowery language.
Yes,
in the
that's
meantime.
probably what it is. It's the flowery language that's like, okay, what exactly are they saying? Get right.
Mhm.
Like, but you can figure it out. It's
Yeah,
doable.
yeah, definitely.
We're so happy you joined us for this episode. We hope you will join us next week as we discuss The Secret Garden. If you have suggestions for books we should read and discuss, please email us at thebestbookspodcast@gmail.com. We would love it if you would leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts and share our podcast with your friends. We want to inspire and encourage as many people as we can to read out of the best books.